There is a specific kind of silence that lives inside a man who was never taught how to be one. It is not the silence of peace. It is not the silence of a man who has found himself and gone still. It is the silence of a question no one ever answered. A question the man was not even given the language to ask. He walks through his 20s carrying it. He makes decisions from it. He builds relationships around it. And most of the time, he does not know it is there. Most men in that position spend their lives trying to solve a problem they cannot name. They read the books, they follow the channels, they find the frameworks, and some of it helps. It genuinely does. But there is a particular wound that tactical information cannot close, because the wound is not about skill. It is about formation. It is about the slow, patient, repeated process by which a boy watches a man and learns, not what to do, but who to be. When that process is missing, something remains unfinished in him. Not broken necessarily, not ruined, but unfinished. And the truth is, most men never stop to reckon with that. They just keep moving, keep acquiring, keep performing, hoping momentum will eventually produce the thing formation was supposed to give them. It will not. This is a video about that reckoning, about what it means to build yourself into a man when no one showed you how. About the honest and sometimes painful work of becoming the thing you were never given a model for, and about why that work, as hard as it is, might be the most important thing a man in your position will ever do. I was 23 years old, sitting in a church parking lot in Atlanta after a men's Bible study, and a man I barely knew asked me a question that I did not know how to answer. He had been watching me for a few weeks, not in a strange way, but in the way a certain kind of older man watches a young man who is doing a lot, but not going anywhere. He pulled me aside after the study and asked me, simply, "What kind of man are you trying to become?" I remember that I smiled. I remember that I said something that sounded like an answer. Something about being successful, about taking care of my family one day, about being a good person. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like the right kind of thing to say. And he looked at me for a moment and said, quietly, "You're describing outcomes. I asked you about formation." I did not know what he meant, not fully. But something in the word hit me, formation, because I had never once in my life heard a man use it in reference to me. I had heard about performance, about achievement, about things you were supposed to have or become by a certain age. But formation, the idea that there was a deliberate, patient process of becoming, that was a language I did not have access to. And sitting in that parking lot, I started to understand why. My father was not absent in the dramatic, storybook sense. He was not someone who sat with me and said, "This is how a man moves through difficulty. This is how he handles fear. This is what he does when he has failed and must still lead. This is who you are supposed to become." Those conversations never happened. And so I grew up assembling masculinity from wherever I could find it. Television, older kids in the neighborhood, music, the way certain men carried themselves in church. A coach here, a teacher there. I was doing what fatherless boys do. I was curating an identity from fragments. And by the time I was 23, I had built something that looked, from a distance, like a man. I had discipline in some areas. I had ambition. I had the vocabulary of a man going somewhere. But when that man in the parking lot asked me what kind of man I was becoming, I had no real answer. Because I had never been asked to think about it in that way. I had been performing. I had not been forming. That conversation was the beginning of the most important work I have ever done. Here is what the culture offers a man in that position, and why most of it falls short. The loudest voices in the men's space right now are selling one of two things. Either they are selling you a set of tactics, the morning routine, the workout program, the financial model, the relationship strategy, or they are selling you an identity that has already been defined for you, usually by opposition. Be this kind of man, not that kind. Assert this, reject that. The framework is already complete. You just have to step into it. Both of these approaches have something real in them. Discipline matters. Identity matters. But neither of them addresses the deeper problem, which is this. A man who was never formed does not simply need information about how to perform better. He needs to do the work of formation itself. He needs to go back to the beginning and ask the questions that were never asked on his behalf, and then sit with the answers long enough to build something true from them. The culture does not have much patience for that kind of work because it is slow, it is not particularly exciting to watch, and it does not produce content that goes viral. Formation is not a montage. It does not have a dramatic reveal. It looks like a man sitting alone with a question for months until the question begins to shape him. And this is where most men in the fatherless generation get lost. Not because they lack the desire to grow, but because the models they are handed are built for men who already have a foundation. Most self-improvement content assumes you are optimizing a structure that already exists. If you are still building the structure, the optimization advice does not apply yet. There is also something specific that the culture gets wrong about fatherlessness itself. The dominant narrative is either victimhood, the fatherless man as damaged and limited, or it is a kind of aggressive overcoming, the fatherless man who became stronger because of the hardship. Both of these are real, both of these contain truth, but neither one captures the particular challenge, which is not about whether you survived or whether you are strong. The challenge is about coherence, about whether, underneath the performance and the ambition and the strategy, there is an actual man, with a consistent identity, a rooted sense of self, a clear understanding of what he stands for and what he will not compromise, that you built deliberately, through honest reckoning. Most men never build that. They just keep moving. And the tragedy is not that they failed. The tragedy is that they never knew it was something they needed to build. The work of self-construction, because that is what this is for the man who is not formed by someone else, begins with what I would call the honest inventory. Not a gratitude list, not a strengths assessment, an honest inventory of where you actually are and what actually shaped you. This means sitting down, literally, with paper if possible, and naming the men who influenced your sense of self, the ones who were present and the ones who were absent. What did each of them teach you about how a man operates? What did they model about how a man handles fear, failure, shame, responsibility, tenderness? And then, this is the harder question. Which of those lessons do you actually want to keep? Because this is what most men never examine. They inherited a version of masculinity, assembled from fragments as I described, and they have been operating from it without ever choosing it. The work begins with the choosing. You are not discarding your history. You are examining it, taking what is real and useful, and releasing what was simply absorbed because nothing better was available. The first thing a man must do in this inventory is name the gaps honestly, not with self-pity and not with deflection. If no one taught you how to handle conflict without either exploding or shutting down, you name that. If no one modeled what it looks like to lead a household with both authority and tenderness, you name that. If you have spent your adult life performing strength while privately carrying a confusion that has no name, you name that too. The naming is not the wound reopening. The naming is the beginning of the repair. Then comes the harder work of construction. Because once you have named what is missing, you have to go find it. Not by looking for a father figure to fill the gap, though good mentors are genuinely valuable, but by choosing, deliberately, the man you are going to become and then doing the daily work of becoming him. This is different from goal setting. It is not about outcomes. It is about character, about how you move through the world, about the kind of man who is present inside every decision you make. This means defining yourself in terms of what you will and will not do when no one is watching. A man's identity is not built in the big moments. It is built in the ordinary ones. The moment he chooses to keep a commitment that no one would know about if he broke it. The moment he moves toward a difficult conversation instead of away from it. The moment he sits with discomfort long enough to learn something from it instead of immediately reaching for relief. It also means understanding that this work has a social dimension. No man forms himself entirely in isolation. The men you are around consistently, over time, shape you, whether you are aware of it or not. One of the most important decisions a man without formation can make is to deliberately place himself around men who are further along in the specific areas where he knows he is still incomplete. Not to perform for them, but to be shaped by proximity to them, to watch how they handle things, to have conversations that go below the surface, to become the kind of man who can both receive and eventually give that kind of mentorship. None of this is fast. None of it is linear. There will be months where you feel like you are making real progress, and there will be seasons where you discover a room inside yourself you have never opened, and you realize you are not as far along as you thought. That is not failure. That is formation working as it is supposed to work. There is a passage in the first chapter of Joshua that has stayed with me through all of this. God speaks to Joshua immediately after Moses has died, and what he says is striking because Joshua is a man who has spent 40 years standing behind someone else. Moses was the leader. Moses was the one with the voice, the vision, the direct line to God. And now Moses is gone, and Joshua has to become the thing he has only ever watched someone else be. God does not offer Joshua a framework. He does not give him a self-improvement plan. What he says 3 times in the span of a few verses is, "Be strong and courageous." And then he says something that sounds almost like a contradiction to a man in that position. "Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." The reason that passage has never left me is that Joshua was not a man who had never been tested. He was experienced. He was capable. He had seen things most men never see. And still, God addresses the fear. Still, God speaks directly to the thing that lives underneath competence, the quiet uncertainty that says, "I have never led myself, let alone anyone else. I do not know if I am enough for this." And the answer God gives is not a strategy. It is a presence. It is the assurance that the formation that feels incomplete, the gaps a man can name if he is honest, does not disqualify him, because the God who calls a man into something also accompanies him through the becoming. This is what makes faith-integrated masculinity different from secular self-improvement, and it is not a small difference. In a purely secular framework, the fatherless man is trying to build himself with whatever tools he can assemble, and the work is entirely on him. In a faith framework, the work is still real. God does not do the formation for you. You still have to show up. You still have to be honest. You still have to do the hard daily work of becoming. But you are not doing it alone. And more than that, the God who is with you is also the Father who is missing. He has seen every gap. He knows every room you have never opened. And his interest in your formation is not mechanical or contractual. It is covenantal. It is the love of a father who has been present even when no one visible was. That is a different kind of foundation to build from. Here is the one thing I would ask you to do today. Find 15 minutes. Turn off the noise. Sit with a piece of paper and write down the name of one man, just one, who shaped how you understand what it means to be a man. Maybe he was present. Maybe he was absent. And write down honestly what he taught you. Not what he intended to teach you, but what you actually absorbed. Whether it was given in love or by neglect, it shaped you. Then ask yourself, is this the thing I want to keep building from? That question does not need to be answered in 15 minutes. It may take years to answer fully, but the asking of it is the beginning of the kind of deliberate work that separates the man who keeps performing from the man who is actually becoming. You are not the man someone else failed to make. You are the man you are choosing to build.